Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Love Meets Literature. I'm your host, Rachel, and you can find me on Instagram at Paperbacks and Sketchbooks.
And I am your other host, Joe, and you can find us at Love Meets Literature.
You can find us on every corner of the internet, so please do give us a follow. It will help us immensely. So today's episode is all about our current and recent reads. You know, we just read so much that we don't always have time to talk about everything we're reading on this podcast. However, I like to rehash what we have read recently. So that's what today is all about.
I love it.
Yeah, should be fun. I'm excited to know what you've been reading, what you're currently reading, what you want to read. So I think that should be interesting.
I'm also curious on how many you have read in the span of me reading like one book. I always feel like you read like 10. So it's nice to take a moment to catch up on all of those.
Well, all I do is read. I don't do anything except read.
That's true.
But before we jump into all of our books, what have you been up to this past week?
I feel like so much, but nothing at the same time.
Well, what have you been doing? I mean, I should know what you've been doing, but I don't always know what you're doing.
What have I been doing? Working a lot.
I feel like most people can relate to that.
I've been playing the new Call of Duty, which is weird for me because I haven't played Call of Duty in a very long time.
That is weird.
I haven't played one since, oh wow, it's been like a really long time now that I'm starting to think back. For anybody that is aware of Call of Duties, it probably would have been Modern Warfare 3, which is like really, really old. For reference, we're on Black Ops 6. I played a little bit of the third Black Ops for zombies, but I had to physically turn around and look at my calendar to remember what I've been doing.
Well, haven't you been doing your like martial arts thingy?
Yes, I did sign up for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
Which I did one class and it was a good time. It was really hard. It was very tough. Way harder than I thought it was going to be. I had tried another class before and it definitely didn't feel like my speed. So then when I tried this one, it was like engaging the entire time. And so it was really fun. But I was so sore afterwards. Like my hips and my legs, I didn't realize how much of those you use. And so they were very, very sore, along with my like back and abs. I would say between that, work, homework, and then some video game playing and a little bit of reading in there. That's been everything I've been doing. What have you been up to recently?
I feel like I've been up to a whole lot of nothing. I've been trying to finish some books. I've been watching random things on TV. I randomly decided to watch The Voice last night, and it was actually, pretty good. I forgot how good that show was. I used to watch it a lot when I was in high school, and now it seems like better than when I was in high school. Reba's a judge. Snoop Dogg's a judge. They've got Michael Bublé and Gwen Stefani, and they're actually a good group of judges, I think. Like, they're very entertaining. I'm still on the blind auditions. So, like, if you don't know how The Voice works, the judges are not facing the stage when the people audition. And so the people go on stage and they sing, and the judges have to press their button to turn around. And they only have 90 seconds of when this person's, like, up there singing to do so.
Oh.
So they have to decide in those 90 seconds if they want them on their team. And then once they have all their teams, they, like, battle and whatever. So like people get eliminated from their teams, and then last one standing is the winner, and that coach wins.
Interesting. I did not know that aspect of it. I knew about the buttons, but that was like it.
Yeah, The Voice is very complicated with rules. Sometimes they added some new rules that I have no idea what the heck they are because I have not watched the show in years. But apparently Reba won last season. So maybe she'll win again this season.
Does she get like a perk if she wins?
I don't really think so.
Or are they just doing it for the love of the game?
Maybe she gets a pay raise. I don't know.
That would be crazy. That would be so cool, actually, if that was like their incentive to win, is they got an increase in pay.
I mean, they're already making like thousands of dollars an episode, but it's been entertaining, and I feel like I want to watch more tonight, but I'm kind of liking my current read, which I'll get into later. What else have I been doing? I started a new crochet project, so I've been working on that. Well, I worked on it like for one day and then I put it aside, but I'll pick it up again. I've been going on a lot of walks.
That's true. You've been doing a ton of walks, taking advantage of the weather while there's still no snow on the ground.
Yeah, because it was way too hot all summer.
Yeah,
And now, I mean, it's on the verge of almost too cold, but if you go during the day when it's sunny outside, it's still nice.
true.
And yeah, I'd say that's pretty much what I've been up to between working and keeping my Bookstagram alive.
I mean, hey, sometimes you just got to do the day to day.
I guess sometimes it's kind of boring. But, you know, sometimes it's better to have not a lot going on than too much.
That's true. I like the calm.
The calm is nice. We get to taste cake this weekend. We have our wedding cake tasting.
We do. I'm very excited for that.
So that'll be very fun. Our bakery does it as a to-go tasting. So we get to take it all home and eat it at our leisure. So that's nice. And then we just got to wait for the actual food tasting.
That's true. I'm very excited for the actual food tasting. I can't wait for that.
That will be fun. I think the most fun parts of wedding planning will be choosing the food.
It's got to be the most fun, right? You just like, they bring stuff out, you just like eat it, and you get to be like a, I don't know, celebrity for a moment. You're like, no, yes, no.
I mean, it's got to be more fun than trying to figure out all the other things.
I definitely think comparatively, yeah, it's by far the best. I mean, I wouldn't know, but I would assume that maybe picking out your dress could be a contender up there. But personally, from the groom side of things, the food's definitely the highest thing on my list.
Yeah, I think food would be the best. So we've both had busy yet uneventful weeks, and it's been getting cold outside. So I know you're not like super into this, but I need to know why you are not a fan of Christmas music.
Ugh, I don't know. I've never really like listened to it all that often. I think what did it for me was when I was in grade school. I don't know about you, but we notoriously did a singing thing every single year. And so we would sing Christmas songs, and like all the parents would come to the gymnasium and they would like watch us sing Christmas songs.
Well, we used to do that too.
I think that's where I like started to resent them a little bit and be like, I'm kind of over it.
But like, were you singing the classic Christmas songs or like childish Christmas songs or?
I mean, it's not like we were singing Frank Sinatra. Like it was Rudolph and,
well, the ones that children like.
well, yeah,
Like
Frosty the Snowman,
Jingle Bells.
Jingle Bells. It wasn't didn't Elvis do a version, right? It's not Elvis's song.
That would be hilarious. I personally love Christmas music. It really gets me into the holiday spirit.
I don't really know Christmas music outside of those ones though. Like there's like
What do you
Holy
mean?
Night, and then
Well-
there's like the one by Mariah Carey, and that's like, oh wait, Ariana Grande does one now too, right?
I have no idea. I know like the old ones. Like, I mean, Bing Crosby's got some. There's like Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree. There's a Holly Jolly Christmas. There's a lot of good Christmas songs.
I don't really think I've listened to them.
Well, then you have never listened to 93.9.
No, I haven't.
It was the only radio station that was on in my mother's car when we were kids during the Christmas season because they used to start playing Christmas music exclusively on December 1st. But now they start earlier. I think they start before Thanksgiving. Honestly, they might already be playing Christmas music for all I know.
Isn't it just like the same songs but sung by different people?
I mean, there's different versions of the same songs.
Because like this conversation is making me realize that I don't think I've ever actually like listened to Christmas music.
Well, then you got to listen to some Christmas music because there are a lot of songs. There's like some of the religious ones, like you mentioned, like there's Oh Holy Night, there's Silent Night, there's like Little Town of Bethlehem, there's Joy to the World. And then
Oh, I know that
there's
one.
your like poppy ones, which is like Rocking Around the Christmas Tree, Santa Claus is Coming to Town. They're all
You should
good.
sing all of them for me right now.
I cannot do that. I wish I could, but I unfortunately do not have them all memorized. But Christmas music is fun. I love Christmas music. Get rid of the Mariah Careys and the Ariana Grandes and bring back the Sinatras and the Bing Crosbys and the Dean Martins, because those are the best Christmas music.
I thought people liked the Ariana Grande one. Did they not?
I don't know. People like to hate on the pop stars, so I really don't think so.
Like I've established, I guess I don't listen to it, so I have literally no idea.
I don't even know what her song is, so you got me there.
You know what Christmas music I do like is the barking dogs that your mom plays. It cracks me up every time.
I could have lived my life without ever hearing that version of Jingle Bells. It's just barking dogs singing Jingle Bells.
I think it's very funny. The first time I heard it, I couldn't believe that it was like real. They do make a cat version too. The cat version's not as good though.
You know what else is good? The Alvin and the Chipmunks. Christmas Time is Here.
I do think I heard that. That sounds really familiar.
Probably. I'm not going to start singing it because it's going to get stuck in my head and it's going to get stuck in everyone else's heads.
Didn't they do like a whole Christmas album when their movies came out, or after their movies came out, I think?
They might have, because the Chipmunks were very popular for a hot minute.
I remember they came out with like entire CDs. There was kids in my class that had them.
Yeah, because it was the soundtracks from the movies.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of like skyrocketed in popularity. And at one point they put out a movie that was the Girl Chipmunks.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
What were they called? The Chipettes or something?
Probably. Yeah, they made like a whole bunch of movies, didn't they?
They
Like
did.
3 or 4. I remember they had a really long line of animated movies for a long time, and I had watched those along with the animated show.
Well, the animated show is actually much older than people realize.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I might have to go down the wiki rabbit hole on that one.
I was going to say, you're going to have to Wikipedia Alvin and the Chipmunks, because I think they have more lore than people think.
I would not be surprised.
Anyway, enough about chipmunks and Christmas music. Kind of got off on a little tangent there with the chipmunks. Today's episode, current and recent reads. I'm very excited to dive into these. I'm very excited to talk about books that I've loved recently, books that I haven't loved so much, because, you know, even though I read a lot of 5-star reads, once in a while there's like a 3-star that sneaks itself in there, and it just isn't like as good as I was hoping it would be. But to start off, I am currently reading Hexed by Emily McIntyre, and it is the 6th and final book in the Never After series. The Never After series is a series of standalone dark romances. A dark romance is usually like, it's a romance, but it has sinister themes. Like it's like got like murder sometimes and mafia. Emily McIntyre loves writing the mafia trope into her dark romances. So Hexed does include that trope, and they're usually on the spicy side. So I'd recommend, like, if you are going to pick up a dark romance, that you are okay with spiciness, because it's not like your sweet cutesy romance. It's not like that at all. So Hexed by Emily McIntyre is based off of The Little Mermaid. So her thing again with this Never After series is that they're all based on a different fairy tale. And she likes to call them fractured fairy tales because there's not always a happy ending. And usually it's two really bad people getting together. Hence why it's called a dark romance. So Hexed is about Vanessa Anderson, and she has never been good. She wasn't good enough for her parents, and she isn't good enough for the gangster uncle who took her in after they died. But she's cunning, beautiful, dutiful to her uncle's demands, and she doesn't have time for a moral compass anyway. When her runaway cousin returns to their coastal southern town, she brings a man with her, and Vanessa soon realizes he's the only one who's ever seen her for her. There's just one problem. She can never have him. Enzo Loverboy Marino is a wealthy businessman by day and prince of the underworld by night. Underboss to a notorious mafia syndicate, he answers to no one except his father, the strongest don in the Northeast. When he's tasked with marriage, Enzo doesn't think twice until he meets his fiance's cousin. Vanessa is everything he never knew he wanted, bewitching him with her sultry voice and supple curves. But Enzo learned long ago, for a man like him, life is better without the things you want. When plans unravel and temptation sings its siren song, they'll both have to choose what's more important, duty to their families, or a forbidden love that was never supposed to be. So, obviously, we do have the Little Mermaid reimagining going on. So, Vanessa is supposed to be Ursula, I believe. Enzo is supposed to be Prince Eric. And then Vanessa's cousin, her name is Aria, and she's supposed to be Ariel. She's described with bright red hair, but it's all a dark, twisted take on the characters. So Aria is evil. Vanessa is like evil, obviously, and Enzo's evil. So like everyone's evil in this dark romance. And that's what it's supposed to be. Again, it's not supposed to be your cutesy fairy tale. It's not like a true Little Mermaid reimagining. It's a dark and twisty one. Think Meredith Grey from Grey's Anatomy. Dark and twisty. That's what you're getting in this book.
It's a good analogy. She is dark and twisty.
She is dark and twisty. So, Hexed by Emily McIntyre. This is my current read.
I really like the cover of that book because of the fractured fairy tale that you mentioned, because it's literally got like fractured on there. It's like the shell is cracked and everything.
Yeah, all of her books are actually really cool like that. So I haven't read all of them just yet, even though this is the last one in the series, because they can be read as standalones. There's like nothing interconnected about them at all. It is 100% a series of standalones. So I've read Hooked, Scarred, and Wretched. And all of their covers are kind of like the same thing. They all kind of have like cracks and fractures in them.
What was the other stories?
Hooked was based off of Peter Pan. Scarred is based off of The Lion King. And Wretched was based off of The Wizard of Oz. I don't know what the other ones are. I know they're still Twisted and Crossed that I have to read, but I don't know what they're based off of just yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure based on the names. I mean, Hooked. Kind of, I probably could have guessed that one.
Yeah, Scarred.
Scarred, right.
Scar. Wretched, I mean, there's like The Wicked Witch of the West.
True. I don't think I would have been able to guess that one.
Yeah, I don't know much about the original Wizard of Oz fairy tale, so I didn't really pick up on it a lot in that book. Some of the references are not like as obvious as others, but I'm like really getting Little Mermaid in Hexed, and it might be because I'm super familiar with The Little Mermaid.
I think that probably does play a role in something like this. Like if you really know the story,
Oh, yeah.
it would make a difference. But it sounds like you can still enjoy it even though, or maybe if you don't know the story that well.
Yeah, I mean, I gave Wretched 5 stars, and I really had no inkling that it was about the Wizard of Oz until after I read it, honestly. So Hexed can still be enjoyed even if you're not really familiar with The Little Mermaid. And I am enjoying it. It was a little bit slow to start, but now I'm about 200 pages in. This is like a 500-page romance book, by the way. Not a big fan that it's like so long, but we're finally getting somewhere. I'm 200 pages in and I'm finally like super invested in the story. So that's a good thing. And I think it's really going to pick up from there.
First up on my list is one that we actually talked about very recently that I decided to read. It is called Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter by Seth Grahame-Smith. Basically, this is a historical fiction about Abraham Lincoln, who is discovered to be a vampire hunter. And the idea behind this, or kind of what this story is it's Seth, the author, is actually inserted himself in the story. So he's literally in the story. And then it's written from Seth's perspective, his character. He's the owner of a small town store, and he's given these documents and these books by a random patron of his store. Basically, the patron realizes that he's kind of a writer that's lost his passion, and so he never finished his previous books. And so then giving him the information, he goes, I want you to write basically a memoir of all this stuff, or a biography of all these things. And so then Seth reads it and finds out that they're the journals of Abraham Lincoln. I had talked a little bit about how I think this story came about, and I looked a little bit more into it. I think this is kind of just conjecture. This is like my understanding of maybe how Seth decided to write it this way. But from what I gathered, there was another novel that's called The Secret Diaries of Abraham Lincoln. And this was a historical fiction book, or series of books, I believe, that wrote about these secret diaries that were found that talked about like life on the war front and becoming president and all this other things. So historical fiction. From my understanding, this is a take on that, but leaning more into the fiction side with the vampire hunter stuff. So it's kind of like an idea of another book, which I thought was super interesting.
So did the author like break the fourth wall by inserting himself into the book?
Kind of. Like, it's not like he's basically made himself a literal character.
Oh.
So he's a character in the story with the same name as the author. And he's kind of breaking the fourth wall because the book is written as a biography, but it's also a story. So it's like he's telling it to you as the reader. So it's like, imagine if you're reading a biography, but then there's also points in it where it's kind of like him telling you these different things.
So this is a completely fictional story written like a actual biography. It's like a fake biography.
Right. It's like a fiction biography.
That's kind of cool.
It's very cool. The first time I had tried reading this was a very long time ago. And I think a lot of like the ideas kind of went over my head. And then now that I've come back to it, I actually really like the idea and I think it's really cool. And I'm excited to read more of it. I'm only about, I would say, 15%, maybe even less than like 10% of the way through. So I like just started. And it's not that long. It's 336 pages. So I'm probably like maybe 30, 40 pages in.
Well, it sounds interesting.
It's also, I think, part of a series. I think there, or not a series, but there's 2 books to it. And I think they're both written in the same style, but one takes place with Abraham Lincoln, and then the other one takes place, I think it's after World War II, but I only skimmed it briefly. Depending on how much I like this one, I might have to look out for that second one too.
Does he have like a lot of books or only a few?
He has quite a bit, I believe. He was also the author of the other book that I read, Unholy Night. He also wrote Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which is apparently, I think, a take on Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, I think
With
I
zombies?
know a few people who've actually read that one.
Yeah, it's part of a 2-book series, or technically 3-book series, because there's a sequel to it now.
Well, one book that I recently read that I really liked is The Stone Witch of Florence by Anna Rash. This one is a historical fantasy, and I remember I mentioned it on one of our previous episodes, and I was really looking forward to reading it. So much so that I put it on hold at the library immediately, and it surprisingly came in a lot quicker than I thought it was going to, and I was pleasantly surprised by this whole book. This one takes place in 1348, the Middle Ages. The plague is raging during this time period, and we have our main character, Ginevra di Gasparo, and she has a gift. By harnessing the hidden powers of gemstones, she can heal the sick. But when word spread of her unusual abilities, she was condemned as a witch and banished. Now, as the Black Plague is ravaging Italy, the same men who expelled Ginevra are begging for her return. So Ginevra obliges, assuming the city's leaders are finally ready to accept her unorthodox cures amid a pandemic. But upon arrival, she is tasked with a much different mission. She must use her collection of jewels to track down a ruthless thief who is ransacking Florence's churches for priceless relics, the city's only hope for protection. If she succeeds, she'll be a recognized physician and never accused of witchcraft again. But as her investigation progresses, Ginevra discovers she's merely a pawn in a much larger scheme than the one she's been hired to solve. And the dangerous men behind this conspiracy won't think twice about killing a stone witch to get what they want. So I enjoyed this book. I did ultimately give it 4 stars because there were a couple things that I took issue with, but overall it was very entertaining. So obviously, like our main character, she was expelled from Florence for using magic, and she's later invited back by the bishop to find these lost relics from churches using her magic or whatever. And I thought it was kind of interesting, like learning the whole relic thing in this book, because the relics were like protectors of the area that you lived in. Like people belonged to parishes back then. So depending on like the name of your church, that was like the parish you belonged in. And since the relics were disappearing from these parishes, people blamed that on why they were getting the plague. Like if their relic was gone from their parish, they were like deemed like sick and contagious or whatever. So like if one person from another parish like ran into someone whose parish is missing their relic, they like wanted nothing to do with them because they thought it was like bad omens, like bad signs, like they're not healthy because their relic is gone.
That's really interesting, actually.
It was super interesting. So this book, I really loved the humor in it. Like there was great banter between all the characters. So when Ginevra is back in Florence, she stays with this woman named Lucia, whose husband is gone. He's not dead. He just like left her alone in her house because I guess he didn't want to catch the plague or whatever. And I also really liked how well the setting of the 1300s was done. I felt like I was in the 1300s. I mean, not really, because some modern language was used, but also I can't really like knock points off that because I bet accurately depicting the 1300s is really hard. So I wouldn't even know what language they used back then. I mean, old-timey Middle Ages lingo, I guess. But how are we supposed to know what that is?
Yeah, that's true. That's kind of a hard thing to do. I would assume that you would want to read it localized, right? So otherwise it'd be like very difficult to read.
One thing that I found super interesting about this book is that our author, Anna Rash, is a historian and a gemologist who has previously worked in the jewelry collection at the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
That's awesome.
That is directly from her author bio in the back of the book. And she actually based this book on original research that she conducted on the uses of gemstones in medieval medicine. And she did this research at the Cooper Hewitt Museum and on site in Italy.
That's really, really cool. But it's also the perfect excuse for if she was an actual witch. She's totally got herself covered now. That's genius.
You're right, but like I think that's why this book was done so well. Like for a debut, it was like really, really well done. I just wish that the gemstone magic was used more, explained more, because I mean the focus was more on the mystery of the missing relics, which is fine. Like I said that in the synopsis, but I was just expecting it to be more magic focused. Like she was going to use her magic directly to find these missing relics, you know?
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask about was how was the magic system done, but
Well, since she was supposed to be a witch, it wasn't like everybody had knowledge of magic. It was only her and her teachers who knew of the magic that gemstones can carry. It wasn't as prevalent as I thought it was going to be. It was still there, and they still explained uses of when Ginevra did use her magic and whatever, but it wasn't as prevalent as I was hoping.
interesting. I can see there being a little bit of a disappointment with that.
Yes. And then I also thought, like, so the story is in 2 parts or 3 parts. It's in 3 parts, I think. And part 1 I thought was just laid out a little odd because it kept jumping from the past in 1330s to our present day in 1348. And when it jumped back to the 1330s, it was talking about Ginevra's past, but then it would like keep kind of like jumping back and forth. And I kind of wish that it just like laid out all of her past at once and then did the jump forward to the now. Like I kind of get why the author did it that way, but also for my brain personally, I would have just preferred the one time frame and then we go to the next time frame, especially because this book is already written in parts.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, like part 1 being the past and then part 2 being the now. I could definitely see that being a benefit too, because then once you're in the now, you can be like, oh, right, I remember that is relevant because of this portion from her past or something.
Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, the author was kind of doing that by like flip-flopping the time period every other chapter. It was like Ginevra's past and the corresponding thing that's happening in the present time. But just for my brain, it was a little convoluted. But I mean, overall, it was really good. I did give it 4 stars, which means I really liked it and I would still recommend it. However, if you're looking for a more fantasy-centered book, this isn't really that. This had more of the historical element on display than the fantasy. So I'm interested to see what this author puts out next, if she puts anything out next, because I wonder if she would like lean more heavily into the fantasy, or if maybe she discovered she would love to write a historical fiction instead. Like I just love the research aspect that she did.
Yeah, I think that's super cool, especially like being a historian and you can do your own research for your own book. Like that's such a
Yeah.
cool. First of all, it's an amazing like flex, but at the same time, that's such a cool thing that you can do for your own stuff. You can literally go research your own things and I know you could do that for a normal book, but it's one thing like she could make a discovery if she wanted to for her own book. Like that's so cool.
I know. So, The Stone Witch of Florence by Anna Rash, definitely a great one to check out if you're into historical fantasy.
Next on my list, and you might be surprised to hear next on my list because these are all ones that I am currently reading. I've got 3 that I'm actively pursuing.
You are reading 3 at the same time.
Yes. Can you believe that?
I cannot believe that.
The third one I will talk about shortly. That one might be the one that gets scooted along and just dragged along, but this one is the one that I have like fallen in love with, and it's called Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. And if you know anything about sci-fi, you've most likely read Ender's Game or at least heard of it. I believe it's also a movie now. I didn't know if I was going to like this, and I'm now 26% of the way through the audiobook, and I love it. Which is saying something because they're even like doing voices and stuff. And I've mentioned that I don't like the voices, and I still absolutely love this book. In order to develop a secure defense against a hostile alien race's next attack, government agencies breed child geniuses and train them as soldiers. A brilliant young boy, Andrew Ender Wiggin, lives with his kind but distant parents, his sadistic brother Peter, and the person he loves more than anyone else, his sister Valentine. Peter and Valentine were candidates for the soldier training program, but didn't make the cut. Young Ender is the Wiggin drafted to the orbiting battle school for rigorous military training. Ender's skills make him a leader in school and respected in the battle room, where children play at mock battles in zero gravity. Yet growing up in an artificial community of young soldiers, Ender suffers greatly from isolation, rivalry from his peers, pressures from the adult teachers, and the unsettling fear of the alien invaders. His psychological battles include loneliness, the fear that he is becoming the cruel brother he remembers, and the fanning the flames of the devotion of his beloved sister. Is Ender the general Earth needs? But Ender is not only the result of genetic experiments. The war with the buggers has been raging for hundreds of years, and the quest for the perfect general has been underway for almost as long. Ender's 2 older siblings are as every bit unusual as he is, but in very different ways. Between the 3 of them lie the abilities to remake a world, if, that is, the world survives.
Ooh.
This book is obviously extremely sci-fi, and it takes place, I don't remember if they actually say the year, but it's like well into the future. And there's an alien race that attacks them. And the only reason the human race survives is because they had this incredible general that knew exactly how to strategically do all of these different things and basically led them to a victory. And so the whole premise of this story is these people are the government, or more precisely, the military, is tracking and genetically building what they believe to be all of the traits to build a perfect general to replace the one they lost, the really, really smart one. And Ender is supposed to be this person. It's really interesting because this story is like, the boy is super young. Like he's only, I think, 6 or 7 years old right now, but he's incredibly intelligent, like beyond something. I think his IQ or whatever in the story, they talk about him being way smarter than like even grown adult military men and these other military officers that are like, you know, well into their 30s. And the whole point of that is because, again, he's genetically modified and he's like predestined to be this perfect person, more or less. And it's just really interesting. The only part that I don't like about this book so far is the zero gravity part that they mention. They have like these mock battles, and it's so difficult to follow what's happening. But besides that, everything else is really cool.
Well, that doesn't sound like my thing, but it's a good thing that you're enjoying it.
Yeah, this is like, if you love sci-fi and you haven't read this, I would highly recommend it. I'm only 25% of the way through, or 26, but I still would recommend it. But if you are like not into sci-fi and you're looking to try something, I would not recommend this is the one. It like throws you right into it, and it's just all sci-fi stuff. Again, like kind of hard to follow at times, and you get a little bit lost because they're talking about all the like tech and the buttons and the whatever. I think it's pretty easy to get confused.
Yeah, sometimes sci-fi is just like too big brainy for me.
Yeah, I think they try to talk about things that aren't supposed to be possible, like just these way bigger concepts. And I think that's really hard to explain to somebody that doesn't have the same mindset as you, or is not familiar with the concepts, at least. This is also written in 1985. So, like, some of the things are kind of like, we're kind of doing it now. Like, they were talking about these video games that they would play as part of training exercises. And one of them was like, you kind of submerge yourself into it, which is like VR that we have now. And I just thought that was kind of interesting. Again, that was Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. And I'm very excited to continue that one.
Well, I also recently read a thriller. I have kind of been on a thriller kick, kind of not. I'm like itching to go back to reading thrillers once I'm done with Hexed. But the thriller that I recently read was Triptych by Karen Slaughter. And this is the first book in the Will Trent series, which I put off for so long for God knows what reason, because this was so good. Easy 5 stars. I just love Karen Slaughter's writing. Will Trent is also a TV show now, which is also more incentive for me to read this series because I want to watch a TV show. In the city of Atlanta, women are dying at the hands of a killer who signs his work with a single chilling act of mutilation. Leaving behind enough evidence to fuel a frenzied police hunt, this cunning madman is bringing together dozens of lives, crossing the boundaries of wealth and race. And the people who are chasing him must cross those boundaries too. Among them is Michael Ormwood, a veteran detective whose marriage is hanging by a thread, and whose arrogance and explosive temper are threatening his career. And Angie Pulaski, a beautiful vice cop who was once Michael's lover before she became his enemy. But another player has entered the game, a loser ex-con who has stumbled upon the killer's trail in the most coincidental of ways, someone who may be the key to breaking the case wide open.
Why'd they have to call him a loser?
What, the ex-con?
Yeah.
If you read the book, you would understand.
Oh.
So this was an easy 5 stars for me, obviously, like I said, and it exceeded all of my expectations. Disclaimer, Karen Slaughter's books are very gory, and she does go into a lot of descriptive detail with mutilation. So if you cannot handle murder and mutilated bodies, you may want to skip this one because there were a lot of very gory scenes. But I really liked how the story was laid out. The way the story starts, so you have kind of your part 1, and you meet our main character, Michael Ormwood, and he is a cop who, when we meet him in the beginning, he seems fine, like he's got a family, he's got a son, and then at the very end of part 1, something happens and you're like, oh man, this Michael Ormwood guy is not who we thought he was. And it gets wild from there. So then enter Will Trent, who is the namesake of the series. He works for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and he has come onto this murder case that Michael Ormwood was investigating because they need help. Kind of like what Criminal Minds does. They like come in to help police stations with stuff. I loved Will Trent. I thought he was a great character. He's like not shady or skeevy whatsoever. Like, sure, he has his character flaws, but he's also kind of quirky, and he seems like very Down to earth, kind of relatable. So Will Trent, we like Will Trent. We don't like Michael Ormwood. He's very detestable. Angie Pulaski, we like her. We like Angie. And the ex-con, we have our ex-con in this book. I am not remembering his name right now, but I also kind of liked him, surprisingly. I don't really know if that was Karen Slaughter's intention to make the reader like this ex-con, but basically we meet him and he's on parole and he was in jail for murder, like a very brutal murder of this girl when he was a teenager. And, it like goes through that and like it kind of flashes back at some points to the actual murder. And we get to follow him on his day-to-day ex-con life, working at a car wash, like trying to make a home for himself. He's checking in with his parole officer. Like nothing is screaming like this is a bad man to me, even though we are thinking he's a murderer because he killed this one girl, but he's like really showing signs of reform. A lot of things happen, a lot of things are revealed, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but the ending was so mind-blowing. I was like, oh my God. But also like I kind of knew what was going to happen. And I don't know if it was Karen Slaughter's intention to kind of make the reader know what was going to happen because it felt very obvious sometimes of who done it, but it kind of felt like it was purposeful in a way to like kind of really make the reader hate who done it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure. I wonder if it was one of those things where if you're following along closely, maybe you get that satisfaction of like, I knew it. And then if you weren't and you were maybe a little bit confused, you also got the satisfaction of being like, whoa, it was them, like that kind of thing.
Well, I was just so engrossed in this story that there was like this one girl's name who was mentioned a couple times, but it was different spellings. And I was like, well, I wonder if it's the same girl. And then it was revealed that, I guess, I don't know if this is really a spoiler, but yeah, it was the same girl. And it was just like that piece of the puzzle where I just like knew. I was like, okay, I know who done it because this is this name that was mentioned. It's the same person who was mentioned previously from a flashback, just like in passing, but she was mentioned. And my suspicions were confirmed. It was the same girl that was mentioned. So my puzzle piece was correct.
Then if I had to guess, then I think my suspicions were correct. Like if you're paying attention and you are kind of taking those mental notes, then it probably is that satisfying, like I knew it was them. And then if you weren't, you still get that nice like, whoa, crazy twist or something like that.
Yeah, like everything about the ending I was very happy with. I like how it played out.
I mean, honestly, you're making me want to read this one.
It was really good. And honestly, the chapters in this one were not as long as other Karen Slaughter books. I felt like they were average chapter length.
How long was the whole book?
Well, the mass market paperback is like a little over 400 pages.
Oh, but it's a mass market.
It's the mass market, so it's short and fat. So it looks deceivingly large, but it's really not.
I'm going to add that one to the TBR right now.
It's called Triptych by Karen Slaughter, first in the Will Trent series. I really liked it, and I actually have the second one in the series ready to pick up from the library.
Next on my list, I'm not going to dwell on it for too long because I think at this point, everybody should know. It's The Titan's Curse by Rick Riordan, and it's part of the Percy Jackson series. It's the third one, in case you've forgotten.
That one was good.
This is the one, if I remember correctly, where like a ton of action happens, I think.
Yes.
I want to say I've previously given this one 5 stars, according to my story graph, which means I probably absolutely loved it. And I do have it this time on audiobook because I just feel like I've been liking audiobooks. I'm not sure if it was just Ender's Game that's gotten me in the mood, but I wasn't supposed to get this for 2 weeks and then I got it today.
Well, somebody must have finished listening to it and returned it already.
It is really short though compared to most books. It's only 8 hours and 48 minutes for the audiobook, which I should be able to get through that really quickly. So I think I might, when I'm like sitting there and I'm kind of wanting to focus on the story a little bit more, I think I might listen to Ender's Game because that's got that sci-fi element that you got to kind of have to pay attention to a little bit more. But since I already kind of know Percy Jackson and this is just like kind of that feeling of like watching a movie you already know over again, then this will be maybe the one that I play a little bit more absent-mindedly. but I'm still excited to listen to it.
It's good. I really liked The Titan's Curse, although I had the title of it wrong for so long. Like I kept thinking it was like Curse of the Titans, which sounds so much more sinister than The Titan's Curse.
It does, yeah. That's like the twisted version of it. But those are the 3 books that I currently have on my active reading list, which is surprising for me.
Yeah, I'm very surprised. You have 3 current reads.
I am normally a 1 book at a time kind of guy.
And
so.
Look at me reading 1 book at a time.
I know, right? We've swapped.
We have. Well, I do have one more that I want to talk about that I recently read. And, I would say I still enjoyed it. However, this isn't one that I loved. And I want people to know that it's okay if you don't love books, because I feel like I only talk about books I love. I never talk about books that were kind of like meh. But other people might like it. I know like a lot of people love this author. So it's very possible that this may be the book for you. So this is The Au Pair Affair by Tessa Bailey. I gave it 3.5 stars. So 3.5 is not bad. I don't even think 3 stars is really that bad. 3 stars is just like average to me. Like it was so-so. Like I still enjoyed it to some extent. So giving it a 3.5, it was like so-so, but like a little bit better than so-so. Almost a 4, not quite a 4.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm on that same scale. Like a 3 star is like middle of the road. Like I'm not unhappy about it, but I'm not particularly happy about it.
Right, like I wasn't thrilled with it. Like it's not one that I'm going to be like shouting from the rooftops for everyone to read.
Right. I think 3 is the exact part where I would maybe situationally recommend. Anything lower than a 3, I think it's either not my taste or I would not recommend it. One of the two.
So The Au Pair Affair is technically number 2 in the Big Shot series. It's a series of sports romances that Tessa Bailey has come out with. So I really loved Fangirl Down, which is the first one in the series. I gave it 5 stars. I was blown away. I was like, this is amazing. And I'm not one to read sports romances really. Fangirl Down was about golf, but a romance. And I liked it because the golfer's like romantic interest was his caddy, which was like super cool to see a female caddy. So of course I was super excited for The Au Pair Affair, which is book number 2. However, it was just like kind of a letdown. It did not meet my expectations at all. Fangirl Down, by far the superior one in the series so far. So I'm not going to go through the whole book and what it was about, but basically we have our main characters, Burgess and Tallulah. And Burgess is a hockey player. And Tallulah is a college student who is the best friend of his best friend's wife. So the main characters from the first book, Fangirl Down, are best friends with the main characters in this book. So that's how they're connected in the series. Tallulah ends up basically nannying for Burgess. So there's an age gap. This is like an age gap romance too. He's 11 years older than her. She's, I think, 26 and he's 37. So there's that age gap, and he has a child and he's divorced. So he needs someone to help out with the kid. So she's like, hey, like, we're like friends. I'll be your nanny. So she moves in after a lot of convincing. So she lives there with them. And this is the part that really got me. So like, this is a book called The Au Pair Affair. An au pair is a nanny, basically. However, there's not much nannying happening in this book, but it was just kind of disappointing on that front because I really liked the kid character. The kid character was like really well written, and I wish we got to see more of the kid, but I understand the focus of the book is not supposed to be the kid. It's not supposed to be like the nanny relationship to the kid, but I do wish there were more like tidbits of that in there, hence the title of the book.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
But aside from that, like this book was like the spice level was like off the charts compared to the first book. And I was like, whoa, this is a lot. Like I got to the point where I was like, I'm like, skip, because it was just a lot. It's like this. Okay, I now know why there was no room for the extra nanny stuff because this made the cut. Okay. It was a lot. Okay. I kind of took issue with one of the characters as well. So Burgess, our male main character, he was very hot-headed. I did not like him. He was very hot-headed, and honestly, like if I were our female main character Tallulah, I would have not gone back to him after that third act breakup that happened in this book. because he's just so like, he's
Mm.
like kind of like red flag to me. I don't know if it's because he's a hockey player. He's got like a bad temper, but I was not a fan. I did not see what she saw in Burgess.
I guess I'm kind of confused about it because you said it's a sports romance.
It's a sports romance. So like there were like scenes of like him playing hockey and whatever. So a sports romance is basically like there doesn't necessarily have to be any sports playing. One of the characters can just be like an athlete.
I'm sorry, I take issue with that. I don't think that counts.
There were like maybe like 2 half scenes of hockey playing.
Yeah, no, I think I don't know if that's a hot take, but like, no, that's not a sports romance. You wrote a romance book. I'll give you that.
Yeah, with like just a main character who plays hockey.
Right, which is different. Because the sport, it sounds like the first one, they were both in golf. So
yeah,
like,
they were both actually golfing. Like they were both golfers. She was a caddy. Like there was so much content of them like on the golf course. He was playing the Masters tournament. She owned a golf pro shop. Like the golf was very, very present in Fangirl Down. Whereas in this one, it's technically a hockey romance, but there was like very little hockey happening.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. Actually, no, I do know how I feel about that. I don't like it.
Anyway, I also got like weird vibes from Burgess too. So like he's a single dad, as mentioned. And he was very overprotective about Tallulah, but it was like kind of like overprotective in the way where sometimes it felt almost fatherly instead of like big burly mean boyfriend is gonna beat you up if you make her mad or whatever.
I see. Yeah, that's a bit awkward.
Like it was kind of like for me. Like I wasn't a fan of that. Also, he was way too overprotective in my opinion. Like there's like a fine line.
Yeah, I think you have to be like polite about it if you're going to be an overprotective person. Otherwise, then yeah, I think it comes off a little strong and you seem, like you said, hot-headed and angry instead of just trying to be protective.
Yeah, his overprotectiveness was not romantic at all. And then there was also this one part where he had back surgery, and this is just a very unrealistic part. He had back surgery, and then they go to Costa Rica for their friend's wedding. And he literally like weeks after surgery, he's jumping off a cliff, diving off a cliff, rock diving.
Yeah, that wouldn't happen. You would destroy your back.
So that kind of too, I was like sitting there scratching my head like, interesting.
Unless it was like a very minor surgery, maybe? I don't know about that one.
I don't remember, but it was like, it made no sense to me. However, like there were some things that I did like about this book. Like sometimes Burgess was like very considerate of Tallulah's feelings, and he always wanted to make sure that she felt comfortable because she does have like a past trauma that's discussed in this book. Obviously, everybody in some book has a past trauma, and that was a big part of their relationship. Like I thought that was written well. I just didn't really like that it took Burgess calling Tallulah a coward in a moment of rage for her to finally go have her own adventures.
I mean, I'm not going to try to act like an authority because I don't read a lot of romance books, but when it comes to like breakups and the stories that I have read, I feel like it's very difficult for an author to write a breakup without one of the parties or possibly both of them becoming like really bad in the reader's eyes. And so then if you go and try to redeem them later, that seems like a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah, like to me, there was like no redeeming Burgess. Like he was so mean to her in that one moment, even though he was like in the hospital and like about to have surgery, blah, blah, blah. But that's no excuse for being mean to the woman you are supposedly in love with.
Yeah.
And that's why I said earlier in my review that I would not have taken him back if I were Tallulah. I know it's a romance and like the happily ever after is what makes the romance genre. So obviously they do get together in the end and all is fine and dandy. But it was just kind of like one of those things for me where I was like, the author really did that. The author really made Tallulah's like big, huge moment of like finally kind of like getting over her trauma almost like tainted by this man.
Yeah, that's a big miss, I would say.
It is a very big miss. And that was what was kind of disappointing about it. But in terms of a romance, it had all the romance elements. So, like, I can't really knock it points for being like a bad romance. It just like, I wouldn't classify it as like a sports romance because the hockey was like not there. I wouldn't classify it as a nanny romance because the nannying wasn't there. I think it was just like done all wrong, like marketed all wrong. But overall, like if you are a romance fan, you like spicy, steamy romances, like this will deliver for you. It just didn't for me.
That's fair. I think they could have written this. If they just made the sport more prevalent, I'd let it slide. I think that's the part just sticking in my brain.
They could have made the sport more prevalent. I think,
You know what they should have done?
yeah.
She should have been an assistant coach or something that gets hired on to run the team
Yeah.
of the son.
Yeah, they shouldn't have made her the nanny, but they were setting her up to be the nanny in the epilogue of the last book.
Well, I think they still could have sprinkled in the nanny part because if she was like the coach or the assistant coach of Burgess's son's team, then it's kind of like she's nannying them or taking care of them.
He didn't have a
something
son,
like that,
he had a
but-
daughter.
Oh, sorry.
But yeah, no, I get what you mean.
Then you could have, I think that could have hung, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know past participles very well. Yeah, I don't know. It was just kind of like off to me. There's another one coming out next year that's third in this series, which I think is also going to kind of have weird vibes just based on what I've read in this book about the next two characters. So we'll see how that goes.
What sport is that one? Do you know?
It's also hockey because it's one of his teammates.
Let's see if they actually play hockey in it.
I will see if they actually play hockey in that. That should be interesting. So the Au Pair Affair, it was okay. 3.5 stars. Discussing it more, I feel like I should have rated it lower. 3.5. I'll just stay with it. I'm not one to like go and change my reviews all willy-nilly. So
That's fair. I think it's one of those things that like when you discuss it, you can kind of pick it apart, but then maybe 2 months from now, you'll think about it and be like, oh yeah, it was fine. And I think it could still be. Because I feel like the farther you get away from something that you kind of disliked, the better it gets a little bit.
yeah, that's true. And I mean, again, in terms of a romance, like it was fine. It was your average romance. So we had some pretty good picks for what we're currently reading and what we've recently read. We seem to be enjoying everything.
Yeah, quite a bit of variety.
A huge variety. We've got a little bit of everything over here. Romance, dark romance, fantasy, thrillers, sci-fi. We've got it all. So I hope everyone has a wonderful week, read some great books, get into the holidays spirit, and happy reading.